I'll be honest, if you don't like Tony Banks and Genesis, you may not like tonight's show. Though if you don't, what are you listening to the show for anyway? Pretty much, I would say most of the show is taken up with a very extensive interview I did with Banks this week, talking about his new box set, A Chord Too Far. It's fantastic, actually. It's really well worth a listen. Though he doesn't seem to think so. Self-deprecating are the words I would use to describe Mr. Tony Banks. Also, silver mullet. Listen out for that bit. Tony Banks, Silver Mullet, the new album, no. For now, I'm going to hand you over pretty much to Tony Banks, talking about his new box set, A Chord Too Far. What a wonderful thing it is, too. So for the next hour or so, settle back? Maybe settle back instead. Settle back sounds uncomfortable. And give yourselves to Tony Banks. He's good. And welcome back to the Prog Show. I'm Philip Warning, as you know. And he is Tony Banks, solo star, former member of Genesis. Can I say former? I can say. We'll see how that goes.
As much as the band exists, I'm still a part of it.
I'm still one of the triumvirate.
You can't get rid of me.
No,
I tried.
Tony, I've asked you to leave 4 or 5 times. Let's talk about Chord Too Far, the box set of your solo work, which you're here to talk about. The thing that struck me initially was that the cover appears to be a man spanking a piano. Now, is that what composing is like sometimes?
Well, you're sort of fighting, wrestling with the piano is the way I sort of look at it, really. And also, the title, Chord Too Far, is a bit like, because my music sometimes goes a bit far, chordally for some people, but it's whether the piano, when I'm trying to make the piano do something it doesn't want to do, whether the piano's trying to make me do something I don't want to do. Yeah. It's difficult to tell from that picture, I think. So it's quite appropriate. It's an image I've loved for years, which came from a French graphic novel called Philemon et le Piano Sauvage.
Oh, it looks French, actually.
And it's just, I always liked the image, and when we were thinking about possible covers, I thought, well, let's use that, because, I've had it in the back of my mind for years.
You were saying about composing. Does it sometimes feel like you are tussling with the piano, and the piano's winning?
Well, no, you get days when it's sometimes everything happens very easily, and other days it's a bit more tricky, but no, I think it's sort of I'm trying to do always, I try to squeeze something out of which I feel hasn't been done before. I mean, I like to obviously harmony is probably where I'm kind of most adventurous, and I tend to sort of play around a little bit and see what you can get away with. I don't want weird chords just for the sake of it, but if you can somehow make it work, it's amazing what you can make work, I think. But that means my music can take 1 or 2 listens to get into, I think.
To get to know, get to like, get to enjoy.
Get to like, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. 49 songs, handpicked by yourself. I always ask people this when they bring out catalogue stuff, all that perspective stuff is obviously on the Prog Show, they do a lot anyway. I mean, how does it sound to you? Were you elated, embarrassed, a mixture of both?
I think it all sounds great.
Tony Banks, ladies and gentlemen, Tony Banks.
I listen to the stuff and I sort of feel there's a lot of good stuff there, I mean, I was able to get rid of the 1 or 2 which I wasn't so happy with, because obviously it's not everything on this compilation by any means. And we remixed 1 or 2 things where we felt the sound could be better, particularly the earlier ones. We'd already done A Curious Feeling, which was my first album. Of course. And then the next 2 albums, 1 or 2 moments on that we thought we could improve slightly, so I did that with Nick Davis, who I've worked with now for many years. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by what I came across. 1 or 2 that I had sort of forgotten about more sounded really good to me, and others that I always liked, still liked. Yeah. Tried to, with this compilation, I've sort of slightly changed the emphasis, so that the ones that were emphasised more strongly when the albums came out originally, i.e. released as singles and stuff, of course, I've kind of given them slightly more of a back seat on this, so that the ones I've put to the front are the ones that I felt didn't get so much of a chance first time around. Just why not? But I think there's a lot of stuff there for people who've liked Genesis over the years, and particularly my contribution to it, could like. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and did the 49 kind of present themselves quite easily, or was there a lot of head scratching? Not really. I had a rough list of my own, and then I talked to 1 or 2 other people about what they would have wanted on. A couple I wouldn't have chosen, they were keen on, and I went back to them and thought, yeah, okay, that would be good. And then a couple that I wanted, I left off. I just, pretty much it was what I wanted, I have to be honest. And I decided to keep, my original idea was have it shorter, maybe just have 2 CDs, but then Esoteric were keen to do 4 CDs, and I got quite into the idea. And I thought I'd make 1 CD completely instrumental, to concentrate slightly more on the orchestral work I've done in the last 10, 15 years, and couple that with some other pieces that sort of fitted into that. Do you often go back and look at the catalogue, or are you one of those people who've done an album, then you move on to the next thing? No, I often refer back. I'm one of those people who's often done it. Even with the Genesis stuff, because when we redid all the Genesis catalogue about a few years ago now, I was kind of, along with Nick Davis, I was there all the time on every song. trying to put the band's point, just making certain that everything that I remember from the past that we wanted to be there, and to make certain that we didn't go too far away from it, Yeah. So it was no way was it supposed to be a Tony Banks interpretation of Genesis. This was Genesis, and I think we were able to improve a lot of the songs by doing that, particularly the early days, just because quality. I mean, we did some of those early albums very fast, and because the studio time was very expensive.
And also, I think you've improved as musicians and just have a broader
your
palette.
ear, you sort of get more knowing what you're after. Yes, we've improved as musicians as well. But also, in later years, it's the way you make records. As much you can. I mean, something I say, you're faking it. I don't know what you're doing. You're putting stuff down more in layers. Whereas back when we did Trespass and stuff, we were kind of putting the whole thing down in one. Everybody playing at the same time. So if somebody made a mistake, you had to redo the take. I know you could do a bit of rudimentary editing. There wasn't too much you could do. You
could actually do with it,
And I remember I think it was a song called The Return of the Giant Hog. I think it was about 25th take or something. And by which time, I think we were waiting for the drums to get right, funnily enough, because Phil's normally the first to get it right. But by which time I was just going through the motions, But anyhow, the result sounds all right.
Hackett did his first solo album, and then you were the second member of Genesis to kind of do yours. I mean, obviously Gabriel had gone off and was solo anyway.
Yeah, well, that's it. Peter had done his thing, and I think...
I mean, was there something missing within you that you wanted to do?
No, we'd always wanted to do it, and Steve did his... We had a sort of hiatus after Peter left, and Steve wanted to do his then. I think Mike and I felt we wanted to keep what we had back for the Genesis album that was coming up. So I did think about doing a solo album at that point, but ended up putting everything I'd written onto the Trick of the Tail, which obviously was Man Man Moon and Trick of the Tail and Robbie Salt and Battery, but also large parts of some of the other songs like Ripples and Entangled and things, which would have been on that. So, it was kind of, it was important there was material available for that. But when it came to, Mike and I decided to do the albums at the same time because Phil was having a few problems and wanted to go to try and sort out his life. It meant him going to Vancouver. We weren't quite sure for how long, but we said, look,
you come back when it's done.
We want to do this anyhow. Let's have a go, Yeah. It's a totally different experience working on your own. You're not reliant on other people. You can do what you want.
Yeah.
And I could sort of follow everything right through. So A Curious Feeling became a bit like a sort of Tony Banks track, like, say, One for the Vine, extended over a whole album, as it were. And I did enjoy doing that a lot. And so once you've done it once, you get a taste for it. You kind of want to do it. But it's been, let's be honest about it, a slight lack of response from the record buying public. It did make it a slight disincentive to doing the next one. But it's a bit like having babies, I think. Women think after they've had one baby, they'll never have another because it's so awful. But they find that they end up having another one and another one, because you sort of forget what it was like. So I love
what
the
analogy.
I know, sorry about that. I love the process of writing. That's my favourite thing, and then recording it and realising the results. And right up to the moment I finished it, and it's great. But you put the record out, and you then have to put up with other people's opinions of it, which is, you get some good, some bad, I suppose. But what I found most difficult, I suppose, and particularly once I did the last of the rock albums I did, Strictly Inc., was sort of general indifference. Put the thing out, it didn't matter really.
Yeah.
No one even listened to it, let alone try to review it or anything. So it was I felt it was a bit of a waste of time. So I did stop doing rock albums after that.
But A Curious Feeling charted, didn't it? I think
Curious Feeling did okay, and then Fugitive didn't do too badly.
Yeah.
Everyone did worse than its predecessor, unlike the Genesis albums, which everyone did better than its predecessor. I think you got more and more. The trouble is I brought the first album out in 78, and I think singles became more and more important after that.
Yes.
And I never had a hit single, so didn't really get the chance to do that. But I'm not really complaining because I think, I did all this music, had the opportunity to work with loads of, fantastic musicians and singers and everything. Very varied from what I did with Genesis. And yet I had Genesis as well, which was great.
That's nice, isn't it?
Get away with it,
Yeah. Part of my favourite period of your work is I really like the film soundtracks. I really enjoy the film soundtracks. I mean, is it so you turned down the Terminator job?
I didn't turn it down. Well, I sort of suppose I did. Well, it came up as one of the possibilities. I'm sure they sent the script to loads of people.
Yes, of course, yeah.
I was one of the people who turned it down. I couldn't do it because we were on Visible Touch or something. There was a tour coming up. Couldn't do it. I don't think I'd have been right for it necessarily anyhow. So, but, yes.
Why do you not? Why do you think that?
I don't know really. I'm not sure. Well, the way it turned out was pretty good. So
it wasn't bad.
You feel that perhaps they got the right guy, because sometimes music can be such an important part of it. It's sometimes quite difficult to know what an effect it has. It's very obvious with a film like The Good, the Bad and the Ugly how important the music was. That if it had a conventional, Western soundtrack, it wouldn't have been anything at all. But with the music it had, it was sensational.
So enigmatic, yeah.
And I think something like Terminator, you could say the same. You need the music that came out with it was right, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm not really arguing that. I mean, things came and things went, and when I was being offered films, I couldn't do them because we were busy. And then when I actually wanted to start doing the soundtracks, I couldn't get anyone to offer me anything. So, as you must know, I've done 4 soundtracks, and none of them have really been hit films. So the best one was probably The Shout, which was the first one I did when Mike and I wrote some music for it. But the ones since then, unfortunately, none of them were really what you might call big hits.
And what happened with 2010? Were you working on 2010?
I was originally brought in to do the music for 2010. The guy, Peter Hyams, who was the director, had heard what I'd done on The Shout, like the theme from The Undertow,
it's great theme,
which was used, and he thought it was great. And so I thought this was going to be easy, because that's the sort of thing I write in my sleep, And so I wrote a piece that I thought would work, and he didn't like it. And I gave him 3 or 4 backup pieces as well. He didn't like them either.
Wow.
The producer was very enthusiastic on the thing. Anyhow, I tried 2 or 3 more attempts, and I got one that he was reasonably happy with. But in the end, I think he decided, a combination of not being sure about what I'd written and my inexperience. And I don't think he really knew what he wanted. He wanted to write his own music, to be honest.
Oh, okay.
But obviously the guy who took over from me on that was James Horner.
Yeah.
He's all right.
Yeah, he did go. Yeah, he's not bad. Yeah.
Unfortunately, he's no longer with us.
Yes, because he's literally passed, doesn't he?
Just died away.
Yeah.
Just died, which is a shame, because I think he became the go-to kind of guy, a bit like after Jerry Goldsmith sort of stopped doing it. He was the man. It would have been nice to have done that. And I think what I wrote, which sort of in rudimentary form, ended up for the film Lorca and the Outlaws, which I did later on as the piece Red Wing. But obviously, I'd have done it more big.
Yeah, it'd been more orchestra, more imposing,
stuff, but I'd have kept the sound I used on the beginning. I'd have kept them, and I really liked that effect. I thought it was great for the loneliness of space and everything, But he, as I said, I think it would have worked really well for 2010. Actually, I think it would have made it a different kind of film. It would have been less Hollywood and a bit more kind of interesting, I think. But hey, I would think that. But I went there. I went on the film set, and I saw Roy Scheider on a box talking to John Malkovich.
That's a good sentence.
Which not everybody's seen.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Helen Mirren was there. She won't remember.
No, I'll ask.
It was... she won't remember. I came in for one day and just wandered around.
Yeah.
But it was great, because one thing I did do while I was there was I went to the premiere of Ghostbusters.
Oh, fantastic.
Which was fantastic.
I was going
to
say.
The music was fantastic.
Amazing,
I loved it. I came away loving that.
Yeah.
So that was one good thing. But beyond that, really, it was a bit of a strange experience. I did sort of feel a bit out of my depth, in a way, so maybe it was right he sacked me, I don't know, but it was one of those things. We parted company.
Yeah.
Never to meet again.
Are you a bit of a sci-fi geek?
I love sci-fi.
Oh, is that your thing? Is that the kind of...
Well, not my thing. I like sci-fi, amongst other things. Very pleased to see Game of Thrones doing so well. Although that's not truly sci-fi, it's sort of more fantasy, I suppose. But I love sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah, I was a big fan of Arthur C. Clarke and all that, and I love, just Dan Dare, and there was a period when I wouldn't read anything other than that, I suppose, but no, I'm a more general reader now.
Well, that was 3 or 4 years ago.
No, it was more like 30 or 40 years ago. I know you don't think I can't possibly be that old, but no, unfortunately, as you probably know, I am.
You look well on it. So just come back to films a second, because again, I remember seeing The Wicked Lady as a young man, probably too young to watch it, actually. Again, Michael Winner, what was it like working with Michael Winner? Because he is, I think, larger than life by, most degrees.
Yeah, he's a funny guy. He's got this reputation. We got on very well, actually. He was great. He had a sort of attitude that people were kind of, who above the sort of a certain line in the credits were kind of okay, and the people below it were kind of like, were treated like dirt and stuff. But he was very kind to me. I ended up seeing quite a bit of him after that. Went to one or two very extravagant parties and stuff that he put on. I don't think he's a great film director, though, I'm afraid, No, and I was amazed how he always managed to get all these incredible people. I mean, the cast of Wicked Lady is fantastic.
Faye Dunaway, Alan Bates.
John Gielgud, Prunella Scales,
How did you get the job, then? How did you get the nod?
He'd previously done a film, I think, with John Paul Jones, and he liked to work with different people. As I said, I think in my liner notes, I said that maybe because no one would work with him twice. I don't know. But he liked people who were new, I think, who hadn't done it before. I think one of the reasons was because they were cheap. Yes. Because money was quite a big factor with Michael. But anyhow, I played him the piece that ended up as the main theme for that on the piano. I'd done this little demo of it. I thought about putting it on The Fugitive, and then decided it wasn't really right for that album. I had these other 2 pieces I was sort of more excited about because they were slightly more different. But I still thought it was a good theme and could work well for a film. So I then played it to him, and he loved it. On the back of that, with a lot of help from an arranger, Christopher Palmer, we did the film score, and I really enjoyed it. I think the film score sounds nice. It's a very conventional film score. But the film is probably best known for a whipping sequence in the middle with Faye Dunaway whipping the girl who ended up being in Star Trek The Next Generation, I think.
Did she?
Oh, yes, apparently. That's why it's very sought after.
I didn't. I remember seeing it at the time and being moved as a young boy, thinking...
But there was a bit in the middle where the music was used best. In fact, the version of the theme, which I've got on, A Chord Too Far, was actually used during a sort of soft porn sequence in the middle, which in the original showing was heavily edited. So you didn't have much of it, which was a shame, really.
The porn or the music?
Both, actually. I'll leave you to guess which.
Yes, go on.
But in the video, it was in there. So if you buy the video, you'll get it all. I mean, these days it's terribly tame.
I was going to say,
a little more than sort of a flash of a breast here and there. Yeah. But it was. But the music worked great. Soft porn accompaniment, you know.
Maybe that was your calling.
Like Pink Floyd, who always seems to accompany most porn films that I've ever seen.
Yeah, maybe it's music from that era. I don't know. That's quite bizarre. But didn't you say about the Wicked Lady that you heard a piece of your music transposed for the orchestra, and that gave you more of a yen for doing something a bit more orchestral?
It was a crucial thing for me. When I heard the theme, mainly the main theme, I just thought, you know, Christopher Palmer, when he took it and he just arranged it, he did it, and he did lots and lots of different versions in the film, because it was used very extensively. I mean, if you didn't like the theme, you were going to be in trouble in that film. But the version that's actually on the record, which I'm using on the thing, which was used during the middle, he plays, I think, the theme 8 or 9 times in a row, just the basis of the theme. But by changing the arrangement each time, it just sounds so nice. And each time, and I always thought that this would be. The back of my mind, I thought it'd be fun to try and do this sometime in the future, you know. Yeah. And I think after we'd done the Calling All Stations album, which I thought was pretty good, but it didn't go down as well as it might have done, and the touring was a bit of a struggle. I mean, more than anything was because Phil wasn't with us. I do know that. And we decided we weren't going to do another album. Mike and I sort of sat down and talked about it and decided it really wasn't the thing we wanted to do. It was go down the other side of a slope, as it were. Didn't see the point. So I thought maybe I'd retire at that point. I thought maybe I'd give it up. But then I thought I just got to do this. Maybe I'd written a few bits and pieces, and I thought, well, let's think about an orchestral album. You know, I don't know, there's so many hoops to go through on this. It could be very tricky. But I improvised a bit, and I came up with this sort of string thing, just done totally with a string synthesizer, which I thought would sound great with an orchestra, which ended up being Black Down, which is on the first of my 2 orchestral albums, is also on A Chord Too Far. And it was just totally done on a string synthesizer. And when we did the arrangement, I mean, it sticks pretty close to the arrangement. There's a little bit of embellishment in the middle. But the only real addition to the string part was Timp's, which was Simon Hale's idea on the thing, and just to give it a bit of grandeur. And I think that really works well. And once I'd written that, I really felt I had to give it a chance.
Yes.
And so I had 1 or 2 other pieces I'd written I thought could be suitable, and wrote 1 or 2 other pieces to go with it all, and went in the studio and recorded some of it, and it sounded terrible. And
how so? Why was it so bad?
Just I had the wrong conductor. The whole approach was wrong. No one really understood what I was trying to do. The orchestra weren't interested.
That must be so difficult as well. If you've got an entire orchestra you're trying to coerce, bend to your will. Well, obviously a lot of money, but also if it's not working, it must be the more.
I came away from the sessions. I did 2 days, and it was incredibly depressed. I was very depressed. I thought, I could give it up. I'm not going to do this. What's the point? And I went back and thought about it a bit longer, and I started talking to Nick Davis, who was a guy obviously I've worked with a lot, about it, and he was much more up on it. And we decided to give it another go. So we got we got a conductor who was more conducive to what I was trying to do, Mike Dixon, who was at the time was working on We Will Rock You. He was the MD on that. Okay. So he knew the classical world and the rock world.
He's
sort of one of those guys.
Seen both, yeah.
Yeah, and we had another go with the orchestra in the studio, much better prepared this time, having gone over all the arrangements much more thoroughly, and it started to sound a lot better. You know, not perfect, but a lot better, and I was much happier with the result. So that came out as 7, and it was surprisingly well received.
I like a lot of the 80s stuff as well. We'll talk about that in a second. But it was the classical ones that, weirdly, after all that time, were the ones that they went, oh, Tony Banks as a solo artist with an orchestra behind him. Did that surprise you that that's when the kind of affirmation came? I was just surprised that it was well received by anybody in the classical world. No 1 or 2 people who did. I mean, obviously you got the usual dismissive stuff. Well, of course, just film music. I said it's great if it's film music, then please use it in films, because I'd love that. It was a strange thing. I had no real expectations of it. Actually, I just put it out. We went out. Naxos was just kind of like a budget record label, Naxos, doing mainly just re-releases of old material. They do classical stuff. They just do all kind of classical inputs. Classical, but it's normally classical catalogue stuff. You know. Anyhow, the guy, there was one guy there who was very keen on it, and they put it out, and it started to get quite a lot of response. And then we did the second one, 6. Yeah. Which I thought you did 7 and then 6. Yeah. I know. Well, and everyone's waiting for 5. I know. But 6. Of course, 6 actually did really well. Yeah. No. Even making sort of classical chart. Well, they all, I mean, you don't have to sell too many to make. It's like doing singles classical charts. It's not too much. It's not too much, but you still got to do it. You're competing with everything else that's out there. And I just really was gratified to do those and to get that response.
And suddenly it sort of put me on the map a little bit, really, because, say, the rock albums hadn't really sort of really made much of an impression. But so it was nice to be able to do something to give me some sort of reason to stay writing music. So I love writing music, but you can't just write in a vacuum, I don't think. I mean, I've got friends who've done it all their lives, and it's just so dispiriting. If no one ever hears it, then,
Yeah.
But, I was able, therefore, to have a reason for doing it and enjoying myself.
Do you think as well, though, because obviously all the solo stuff you've done before was kind of running in parallel with Genesis anyways, which obviously was going to be overshadowed, but also maybe you couldn't give all of your time to the Tony Banks work.
I don't think it would have made much difference, really. I think, very dependent on Genesis. Obviously, we were terribly lucky to have, obviously, Peter originally and Phil later, who were such sort of somehow, have that charisma that you need, as well as being great singers, So you kind of need that sort of stuff, I think. So I don't think it would have made it. If I'd been on my own, I don't think I'd have ever got a chance to make these records, actually. Yeah. If Genesis had, say, split up after Peter left, I might have been able to do Curious Feeling, but that would have been it. I think if after that probably would have been it. So I'm very grateful from that point of view. I mean, Genesis, I loved doing what I did with Genesis, but also gave me the chance of doing all this other stuff.
Did you ever miss being in a band when you were doing all the solo stuff? Because obviously you started using different vocalists again, I mean, especially on the Still album, which is a fantastic record. Was that because you'd kind of had enough of just working alone again? You wanted to use other voices, or was it just like another instrument?
Trying different ways of doing it, really. I did Curious Feeling, I put under my own name, but used another singer, and that had some identity problems. So the next one I decided I was going to sing myself.
Yeah. Was that The Fugitive?
The Fugitive, which was quite an interesting sort of experience.
How did you feel about singing?
I don't see myself as a singer. I'm not as a performer, but I mean I can sing and I can hold a tune.
Yeah.
And you had to find a way of doing it that sort of where you sounded more than just yourself. If I sing totally pure, it comes out very pure. Yeah. So I try to get a bit of ingression into it and stuff. It partially works. It's not here coming back to it. I'm not embarrassed by it. I think it's okay, but it's not. I don't have the greatest voice. So then when I did the next one, I thought the idea was to do a sort of group, a bit like Mike and Mechanics. You know? So Bank Statement was the idea. So I got two singers.
Great album, Bank Statement.
Well, I think they're all great. You're very sweet.
Tony,
keep saying it.
No. Honestly, I'm not going to say they're all great.
I got. Well, which one are you not going to like? No,
we'll get back to that.
Alistair Gordon and Janie Climack. Yeah. So I tried to make it more of a band.
Is that the Steve Hillis produced album?
Steve Hillis produced it.
That's it. Yes.
So it was quite tough to get him to play guitar, actually. So I didn't really. It's not enough guitar on that album. It's the only thing I'd say because he was a guitarist. I didn't get another guitarist in, but to try and make him do more than go about every sort of 10 minutes was quite difficult.
He did go through a phase where he kind of turned his back on the guitar.
Well, a bit like he was in that phase.
Obviously, it was when you hired him as a guitarist.
I don't really want to play it, but I'm still the guitarist kind of phase. Anyway, we got on finally. Well, in fact, fun enough because he's a quite a character.
Oh, and he's been on the show. I love him. Yeah,
great. But we had, and I think we made a good album. I'm very pleased with the album, but it didn't. We again tried it as nothing came out. Obviously, didn't have quite the success of Mike with sort of silent running and stuff. So you kind of didn't have that. So each time I finished it, I think, well, shall I bother to do it again? And then I just thought with Still, there was a big blank period of Genesis, outside Genesis. I had a lot of songs written. I thought, well, to hell with all this. I'll just use whoever I want.
Yeah.
And I recently listened to the Nick Kershaw album, The Works, and I really liked the album, and I like his voice. And I particularly like the drummer on that album too, Vinny Calusa. So I thought, well, I'll get them on board.
Ex-Zappa band, yeah.
And Janie I'd really loved working with on the previous album. So I got her again. Fish, I'd worked with on the Soundtracks album. So, it's a combination of all these voices.
Yeah.
And to be able to do what I wanted, really. And I thought, to hell with sort of giving an identity for the album. I'll just do it. It's just me plus these people. And I think I think it was
strangely cohesive, though, wasn't it? For something that was just about elements, it was a cohesive record.
Got me all the way through, I suppose. And again, you got those chords. We put out
they're good chords, Tony.
We put out the single "I Want to Change the Score," which I thought was a good song. But slight problem with Nick Kershaw going through a phase where he didn't want to be. He decided he didn't really want to promote his own stuff. So he was. I don't think you really want to promote my stuff on the thing. So we had opportunities to do one or two shows that we didn't do. Having said that, I don't know whether it would happen. I think the song, it's got hit. I would have thought it's a hit potential, but I don't really know. I'm not a great understander of what makes hits and what doesn't make hits. I thought it was a good song, but I thought there were better songs on the album. Yeah, I had probably higher hopes for that album than all the others I'd done, I think. I thought possibly that was the one.
I think it was your most commercial sounding record.
Yeah, well, I think it probably was. I think I had two or three sort of songs that could have done it, but... it's difficult. By this stage, you're getting less and less easy to get any kind of radio play or anything. No one's playing you. And so it's just, if you're not noticed, you've got no other reason to be noticed. You're not noticed. So the album sort of they come and go. And it's slightly dispiriting, I have to say, at the time. But I as a whole, I look back on it and I really don't care now. I just sort of, I'd got these things, they're there, and that's why I'm putting them all out now. And I don't, whatever happens with this, happens with this. It's not, it's a box set of 4 out CDs of Tony Banks music. It's not going to be a million seller. And I just like some of the people who perhaps liked what I've done over Genesis over the years, who perhaps been hungry for sort of, well, particularly the people who always complain that wasn't enough sort of, after Peter left and stuff, that maybe the band changed and things. There's quite a few tracks here that could be called prog tracks, I suppose.
Yeah, there's a few there, I think.
And I think that's, worth a listen.
Yeah, no, me too. I would recommend anyone pick it up. Just going back a second, you were talking about Michael and the Mechanics. Did you actually feel, while you were doing your solo stuff, that you were in competition at all with your bandmates or your erstwhile bandmates? Obviously, Phil was stellar. He was something else entirely.
Yeah, well, I mean...
But did you and Mike sort of meet up occasionally and go, oh,
no, not really.
Nice.
I mean, it would be ludicrous to say there wasn't any kind of sort of feeling about it. I think what we'd have liked is for all of us to do well, actually. Yeah. I don't think anyone was particularly looking... it was, when Mike's albums came out, they always did a bit better than my one, and then of course Michael Mechanics did very well. But that went into a different region, I think, is something I could never... I don't know. I think any competition that might have been with Phil, as you say, went out really with... on day one, really. It was kind of slightly strange because because he was in the group, I suppose. He would be the first to admit that he perhaps was the more junior member of the group, and then suddenly he did this thing, and he comes out with a fantastic album, and obviously In the Air, which is a sort of classic single. And there he was away. So yes, you're right, he was somewhere else entirely, really. But with Mike, and I could always give myself the excuse that, well, Peter and Phil do well because they're the singers,
Exactly, but you and Michael like, hold
Mike?
on. Yeah.
I said, well, my excuse is he got, with Paul Carrick, he got a name singer who was very good. But I don't know, it's I think Mike he's a much better self-promoter than me for a start. And he has he also writes in much simpler fashion than me. I mean, he's very happy with the 3 or 4 chord stuff, which, as I said, not so good at.
Yeah,
I need those extra ones, those nasty ones, that.
Yeah. And I like, but that's part of
well, that's what it is. It's either if you like that, then you like what I do. And I suppose a lot of early Genesis had that. I mean, if you like the introduction, Watch for the Skies, that's Tony Banks, and that sort of thing, I suppose, I've carried through my career. I mean, in a way, doing the solo stuff, half the pleasure for me was to be able to write without anyone else complaining, that I shouldn't use that chord. It's always the point.
Yes,
I say chord too far, but of course with Genesis, particularly by the time it got down to just Mike, Phil, and I, I'd lost my kind of allies, if you like, with first Peter and then Steve, who kind of liked it a bit weird. Mike, and it's unfair because both Phil and Mike do like it weird as well, but they sometimes give me a look.
Headline.
There's sort of yet another diminished chord. Do we need that?
Yeah.
Whereas when I'm working on my own, I can do it and I don't care. So that was half the fun, really. And the writing is what I'm in this business for. I never really intended to be a performer at all. Having worked with the groups became a combination of performers and writers. That's what they were.
Yeah.
As I can play the part, so I'm fine as long as I got someone who's a good performer out there with me.
Yeah.
And as I said, with Peter and Phil, we had 2 of the best. So, that's very lucky.
Quite a hard act to follow.
Well, I wouldn't try and follow it myself.
I was going to say even finding someone to follow.
Well, we had Ray obviously came and I think did a very good job, but
so did I.
It's just coming in and. I mean, by then Phil was such a sort of a big thing, but also to some extent, I think the Genesis audience had diminished at that point. I think even if we'd done an album with Phil, it was a bit of a low ebb there. Phil's solo albums didn't do as well in America as they'd done either. Having said that, I'm not really complaining. I mean, the album made number 2 in England or something,
Yes, yeah.
And I think it's got 2 or 3 really good tracks on it. I think it's a little more uneven than some of the others, but I think it's got some good moments on it. It was a fun experience though, working with. Wasn't just Ray, he was great. There was Anthony Drennan, who's a guitarist on that album. I thought it was on stage.
Yeah.
I think he's a fabulous guitarist, actually. He's working with Michael Mechanics now, but not required to do
Mike again, there he is, Mike the Thorn in your side.
He takes all the guys, he takes the best guys, What it was like, I was very surprised when Phil did his albums and he was working with both Darrell and Chester,
Oh, was it? Damn him. Shake your fist.
I used Chester on my first.
Yes, I was going to say you used Chester.
And then after that I wanted to use Darrell and then suddenly found he was working with, but why not? I mean, Darrell is a superb guitarist and incredibly versatile, so he was a natural choice for me and someone I could really rely on. So he features very heavily on the compilation album.
Yeah, as he should.
Some brilliant playing on there too.
Oh, he's incredible. Obviously, the box set's coming out now, and then the actual catalogue itself is coming out.
Yeah.
Is there one of those albums specifically you would hope that people might catch this time? That maybe would have another pass at that would think, actually, this was something I missed at the time. Is there one you think really stands out?
I think I don't really pick out one. Maybe that's a problem. I think they all to me have their merits. The ones they got more and more ignored. So I think Strictly Inc, which is the one we haven't talked about, which was the last one. But I put that out to nothing. I mean, you really couldn't buy interest in that, so it did nothing at all. And yet, I think it contains some really good things. And I think again, Jack Hughes, who I worked with from was with Wang Chung.
Yeah. There's a great photo of you and he in some excellent suits together.
Oh, is that?
Yeah, yes. You're both sitting on some sort of box, a bit like you mentioned earlier about 2010.
Oh, right.
And you've both got some both excellent haircuts as well.
Oh, right.
We haven't really touched on your haircuts, to be honest, Tony. You've had some amazing haircuts over the years.
Haircuts have changed over the years.
You worked the mullet very well. The mullet in the 80s was a hell of a thing.
I signed some pictures yesterday the other day. I thought, Christ, who's this lot? Sort of, we were pretty boys back in a certain point in our career, didn't last long. But
you had that moment.
Now we're sort of three old men. But it's a funny thing. What are we talking about? Strictly Ink, yeah.
Yes.
Well, of course, that contains a 15-minute piece, Iron in the Darkness, which is sort of, I suppose, closest I've ever come to what you might call genuine prog rock. Yeah. And I did write it with strictly the idea that I wanted to write something that recalled the early days, that had sort of recalling a theme, soft and loud, a bit like I'd done in Fifth, because I thought that worked really well.
It did.
And just, wrapping it around with all this other stuff and having a lyric that kind of had a meaning you weren't quite sure what I was saying, but suggested something, it's really all about ambition and success and all the rest of it. But it's kind of has a real quality about it, I think. I was very pleased with that. I thought it was one of the best things I wrote individually. So, that was on Strictly Ink. So, and I know that most people don't have that, because I think I have all the copies in my own
shed.
My own shed.
and weirdly, we'll come full circle here, but you obviously talked about going back and listening to the music again. Is it weird talking about the catalogue now? Are you enjoying talking about the catalogue? Not specifically to me, but I mean, you are.
I'm happy to talk about it. I mean, it's but people.
Is it good memories, bad memories, or a mixture?
Well, the actual music is great memories. I'm sort of beyond the kind of the way they were received one way or the other. I mean, in the end, who knows? Who cares?
Yeah.
The music's there, and I've got the music there, and with the way we are now, it's there. If people think it's any good, then they've got it. If they don't like it, it's not there. It is music of its time to some extent. I mean, obviously, this was music written between 1978 and 1994 or something. It's a certain kind of thing,
A moment in time.
A moment in time. Moment in 15 years of time.
Yeah. But no more mullets, no?
Well, what I've got now is not a mullet.
Do you know what I was about to say? You've got a silver mullet. That's amazing.
At least I've got it.
Exactly.
It's always a question.
Exactly.
There's Mike, who's sort of going grey, but you're never quite sure with Mike whether he's not sort of doing something funny to his hair. And you've got obviously Phil and Pete, who both sort of pretty much lost all of it.
You've
and
won
you've got
that
Steve,
battle.
who insists he's not dyeing his hair. You know. But he's jet black.
Yes,
we're all a bit suspicious, but. If he says he's not, then he's not.
We had that fine. Anthony Phillips in not so long ago, and he's not. He's got a good head of hair, but
he has, but he's sort of gone from blonde to grey, so he's kind of he's sort of you can't really tell that's what happened. He looks so much the same.
I was going to say he actually hasn't changed. He's just
really,
he's
the one who really hasn't changed. He always sort of says to me, "Well, you haven't changed," and then they look at a picture and think, "Oh, maybe you have," but with. Steve hasn't much, and Ant hasn't. Much as playing guitar. That does it for you. I don't know.
Maybe that's what it is. Yeah, you should have come up from behind those keyboards.
I did play a bit of guitar, but obviously not enough.
Yeah, not. Well, when you've got those in the band, you actually don't need to, do you? Tony Banks, A Chord Too Far comes out at the end of July. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We started with his day job with Stick of the Tail, and we ended with his day job with Watch of the Skies. I genuinely hope, as much as I love his solo work, I really do hope that Tony Banks one day will do something again with Genesis. Thanks so much, Tony Banks, for coming in to talk about A Chord Too Far. That comes out at the end of July. And then the issue of his solo catalogue continues apace until the end of the year. Thanks so much, Tony.